Welcome to Incura's Navigating Change Conversation Series, Special Edition, From Insight to Impact, Applying AI Where Higher Education Operations Need It Most. My name is Tara Bishop. I serve as Incura's Deputy Chief Executive, and I'm thrilled to spend time with you today as we explore how AI is shaping the future of research administration. Before we dive in, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Istvan Fekete, Attain Partners. Istvan joined Attain Partners earlier this year, bringing a passion for inventing the future through innovation and practical problem solving. With the growing need for advanced technical expertise in research administration and the ongoing pressures to both grow and reduce cost, Istvan focuses on how we can successfully meet these evolving and competing demands. And Sylvia Bradshaw, Southern Utah University. Sylvia serves as one of the co-chairs for Incura's fourth AI Symposium, taking place March 21st, 2026 in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Sylvia also represents Southern Utah University in partnership with the University of Idaho and supported by NSF in the AI for Research Administration Community of Practice. Istvan and Sylvia both embody curiosity, innovation, and service, and we appreciate them both joining us today. And with that, let's get started. Istvan, I'll hand it over to you to kick us off.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I wish people in my real life spoke that kindly of me. And number two, you pronounced my full name correctly, which almost never happens. Um, so thank you for that. That's very rare. Sylvia and I coming into this call, we said to ourselves, it's the first day back from Thanksgiving. How many people are really going to be able to attend? And I look at the attendees list and we have over 700. And I think that speaks to the interest within this topic. And so with that, Sylvia, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Istvan. It's a pleasure to be here, an honor to be here with you. Um, and thank you to Tara for her introduction. As she mentioned, I'm with Southern Utah University, which is a predominantly undergraduate institution with a teaching mission located in rural Cedar City, Utah. So AI has become a passion of mine as we try to equalize our engagement in this work. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sylvia. Okay, so what do we have on deck today? We'll talk about some expectations versus reality of, how we may think and talk about AI versus the realistic way we can apply it in our operations today. We'll talk about some characteristics of processes that make them ripe for improvement with AI so that, as you're analyzing your own operations, hopefully it gives you some guidance or a roadmap on, what are the type of characteristics, aspects of my operations for me to take a deep dive into improving it with artificial intelligence. And then, one of the things we wanted to make sure we talked about today is real world practical examples of areas where this, AI is being applied today and improving processes. So we'll talk about some things going on at SUU. We'll talk about some things that we're working on at Attain, as well as that wonderful NSF grant that Tara mentioned in our introductions. So I use the example of laundry when I talk about expectations versus reality when it comes to artificial intelligence. A lot of conversations I have, and taking the laundry process as an example, people want AI to do the entire thing, right? So when we look at doing laundry, there's a bunch of steps in the process. You have to sort the clothes. You have to well, you should sort the clothes. I know my wife yells at me about not sorting the clothes all the time, but that should be a step one. Place clothes in the machine, place your detergent or bleach in the machine, set the cycle, set the water temperature. Maybe if you have one of those new fancy machines, that's one step. Then you have to run the cycle. You have to take the clothes out of the machine, put it in the dryer. Maybe you have a one-stop shop machine. Set the cycle, set the temperature, take the clothes out, fold them, and put them away, right? So there's a lot of steps in that laundry process. And when you talk to folks, They want the artificial intelligence to do all of them. And really, what it's best suited at doing today is handling finite steps within this process. But, a point Sylvia made to me that I think is a really good one is what you then want to do is you want to find mechanisms to weave those finite steps together and create a process that is truly, ran by artificial intelligence. So as we look at this, there's some areas in this process that are more conducive to be assisted with artificial intelligence than others. And so as we look at, that process and break it down by all its different steps, you know, what are some areas that when I look at this, I say, okay, that's where AI may be able to play today, setting the cycle, right, based on the weight of the clothes and things like this, setting the water temperature based on similar factors, running the cycle. And so these, when I look at the process, I think are the areas that are ripe for potential assistance with artificial intelligence. And then what you want to do is you want to tie those processes together and create, your machine startup workflow as I'm calling it here. Because those characteristics by which the artificial intelligence is making its determinations are going to be somewhat consistent through these different things. And so this is what we mean by don't look at AI to do everything for you. Look at the components of the process where it can really be of assistance, and then figure out ways you can tie those together into a workflow. And with that, Sylvia, I'll turn it over to you to talk about some characteristics of a process ripe for automation with artificial intelligence.
Excellent. Thanks, Ish. I love that laundry example. It gives me a little anxiety thinking about my laundry waiting for me at home. And it's that very last bullet that you had on there that I wish AI really could help with. It's that folding and putting away the clothes. That's the piece that I wish we had an answer to. But it also leans into the fact that with all AI processes, AI can definitely help. It cannot do the end validation and verification. And so that's why the laundry example really works well because we're going to need to fold our own clothes and make sure they get put where they need to be put and to make sure that the laundry cycle did its job and to verify that it did it right. So great example. Thank you. So thinking about characteristics of good AI candidates, what is ripe for the ability to import into AI? Well, I don't want us to think about just the low-hanging fruit because this isn't just the low-hanging fruit. There are some good examples of low-hanging fruit when you're needing to take a two-page document and it can only be a one page in your proposal, and you need to have AI help you condense it into a one page. I think that's kind of your representation of a low-hanging fruit. But when we're talking about actual good AI, where we can find the most efficiencies, we're talking about tasks and tasks that are built on each other into workflows. So on your previous slide, that was really good. You had identified different tasks of the laundry cycle, which would then be built into an actual workflow. So thinking about that, what data do we have access to? AI will do you no good if you don't have access to it. The consistency of processes. We live in an it depends world. So often we have to look at things and think through all the different nuances. But if you have processes that don't have the it depends attached to it as much, that makes it much better for an AI use. The speed. How much time does it take to go through processing and making decision making process of that? For instance, when we get those very long notice of awards and we need to search through it to find specific language, that's something that AI can do for us very, very quickly, whereas it would take me a little bit longer. Yes, Control F is fantastic, but AI can also give us the surrounding information for the decision we're trying to make. And then scalability. Is this a process that you see growing and taking up more of your staff time? Is there something that you see that you would love to be able to buy out of your staff's time? Is there something they're spending a lot of time on that you could import AI and it would give you back that efficiency? Again, what is happening from the human use? Are you finding errors that are happening because humans are inputting information. We all make mistakes. I know I transpose numbers all the time, and AI is really good at making sure that our numbers, our budgets and spreadsheets all add up and helping us identify those errors and be able to correct it. Also, the same thing with the skill set. Is there a skill that requires human labor, but not necessarily a specialized expertise? That's something that AI can step in very, very easily. And also frequency. Again, thinking about how much effort your team puts in on a specific task each day. Is there something that you do a lot of? I know in my own world, I do a lot of approvals of EPAS, employee personnel hiring approvals. And that has a lot of different tasks that I put in quite often to send off my approvals for that. That is something that I would love to automate that process for. So those are just some examples of what it is that makes it a good AI use to these. When you think about these different characteristics, again, don't just think about low-hanging fruit. Think about the process that is involved and the time and efficiencies that can be gained from it.
Sylvia, as you were talking there, I had a couple thoughts. With the data availability, I think something that's important to understand is the data a snapshot in time, and can you build the AI solution off that static data set? Or is it a situation where you need to create a real-time flow of updated data, right? And so that's something you definitely want to understand. On the frequency one, you made the comment about, is there enough there that you can benefit from efficiency gains? And something that we'll talk about later on in the presentation is that there is upfront work required to make an AI solution work, right? And so you want to make sure that there's enough bang for the buck on the back end that that upfront investment is going to be worth it. I think sometimes we think about AI as if it's not implementing a new system. And to be clear, it very much is implementing a new system, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. And then you made one other comment about, what are some areas where you want to buy out your staff time? And I think that was a really good comment because some of my best ideas for, where we can look to improve things with artificial intelligence is by talking to my staff and them telling me the parts of their job they hate the most. And so, I think that's a really good point to make. Sorry, back to you.
Excellent. So Tara mentioned that I am fortunate enough to be a co-PI on a AI4RA, Artificial Intelligence for Research Administration. This is a NSF-funded project that is led by the University of Idaho. Sarah Martinick is the lead PI, and Luke Sheneman and Barry Robinson are my fellow co-PIs on this. And they are doing some amazing work. We just started into year 2, a couple months into year 2 already, and it has been an amazing journey learning about what we can do for our community, our research administration community. Why I was so fortunate to be chosen as a sub-awardee on this, I will forever be grateful for, and so glad that we were given that opportunity. Um, as I mentioned, we are a PUI, and part of the program requirements were that any products that came out of this, they needed to be able to be transferable and transferable to different environments. So University of Idaho was very wise in choosing a PUI that could implement some of these processes and make sure that they work in all environments. And I tell you, this is a time when I'm going to toot our own horn as PUIs, as we've come to realize that in our PUI environment, it is a lot easier to pivot, a lot easier to implement these small changes because we are in a much smaller environment where we know who our information officers are, we know who we need to talk to, and we have those one-to-one relationships with them. So it's much easier to maybe implement some of these AI processes in our environment. So I've kind of really had fun taking this time to shine in this area and to be able to help guide others to be able to do this in their work, whether they are an R1, R2, or a PUI. It's been kind of fun. So as part of this work, University of Idaho created what they call the Tamper framework. Um, you see the resources link there. You can go on and access these resources. It's open for anyone that would like to. But this Tamper framework is, what do you think about as you're identifying what is a good use of AI? And there's a worksheet there that you can go through. And if you can't answer the questions well as you go through that worksheet, there's your sign. Maybe this isn't the best use of AI, or this is what I need to do to make it a better use for AI. So we start out with the T and the A. That's for the task. The first thing you need to do is identify the task and make it very, very clear and define it very, very clearly as to what it is you're trying to do. Act as a research administrator. I would like to review this attached NOFO. I'm looking specifically for eligibility requirements. That would be task number one. Then you would decide which model is going to be best for this. Are you using Claude, Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT? Identify which model will be the best. Then you create your prompt. Make sure that you are using prompt seasoning skills that you've learned. This isn't a webinar about how to do good prompting, but there's a lot of resources out there to do it. Your prompting, again, the more clear you can be, the better. And you get better and better at this. When you do a bad prompt, you know it. You get back something that does not prompt you well. But when you get a good prompt, you also know it. And one of the great advice that I have been given and prompting is, when you do get a really good response from your prompt, save that prompt. Keep a notebook, digital notebook, of what that a good prompt really looks like. You can also ask AI, help me to create this prompt. Help me to better this prompt. And it will absolutely do that. Then when you get to that good prompt, save it so that you have a good reference tool for the future. Then the last two pieces of this Tamper framework, that you really, the most important piece is, if we go back to that adage, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. If you don't document what you're doing, it's going to be hard to make it happen again. So that evaluation piece, make sure that you're documenting what your task was, what your model was that you used, what the prompt was that you used, and then evaluate it, put it to the test. See how many times you are getting good responses from that process that you have just implemented. Now, we don't have yet a good answer for how many evaluations is a good amount to. Is it 97%? Is it 75%? Is it 100%? What do we need to be able to call that a good response? That's going to depend on what type of task you're working on. We're also creating a community of practice to help us figure out what those answers are. What should those evaluations be until we call it a trusted process, a trusted AI process. So if you're interested in engaging in that community and practice, I would highly recommend to go to that AI4RA website and join that community of practice. It's really, really simple. You just go to the upper right-hand corner. There's a little tab that says contact, and you go in and you put in your contact information, and there's an open text box where you can talk about what you would love AI to do for you, or anything else you'd like the community to talk about, and then that'll automatically enroll you into that community of practice. You will receive some emails about what is happening on this project, the AI4RA project, and you'll be alerted as well in the future. In year 3 of the project, we will be looking for additional subawardees for additional testing. So absolutely consider this your invitation to join us and to join the conversation, because it's all of you that will make these resources better and better. So please join us in this work. Then the last one is that report. Make sure you do a report after your evaluation, and report what the task was, model, prompt, and what the evaluation results were. That's your documentation to say, hey, this was a good AI process. And then that becomes something that we can share collaboratively across our whole research network. Next slide.
Sorry, I have some thoughts as you're giving this wonderful presentation. I took a prompt engineering course. Our company got an external trainer for us. And one of the things I saw the person putting in there was think carefully as part of their prompt. And that I was like, is this stylistic or are you actually generating better results? And they were actually generating better results, and I tested it myself. So that's a little tidbit to throw out there. You made the point about logs of prompts. And what I would ask the group to consider is economies of scale. And what I mean by that is, research administration and research is kind of a little bubble within an institution. And we shouldn't create AI capabilities within silos that can benefit a much larger stakeholder group. And so when you're talking about that log of prompts, which you absolutely have to do, you have to have a log of prompts, but consider making it an institution-wide thing so that if your tech transfer office or your general counsel's office or your IRB or your IACOOK are coming up with worthwhile prompts, that the entire organization can benefit and leverage those. So consider the broadness of the applications and the prompts and try to avoid creating silos within your organization as you build these capabilities.
Excellent addition. That reminds me of another tip that I was given by Nathan Wiggins, who is our data scientist here at SUU. And did you know that capitalization is a thing in your prompting? If you add capital letters, the AI systems do understand that that means to think carefully. So you're not just yelling at AI, you're saying, hey, this really matters to me. And it does consider that. So kind of interesting to think about. So before we jump into this next slide, I just want to take a minute and have you all engage with your little reactions. Let's see, how are you feeling right now about AI? Are you feeling like you're ready to roll forward? You're still unsure, you're excited, you've got all the time in the world, and you're going to just be able to create processes. Where are we all at? Hey, a lot of thumbs up. I'm impressed. A lot of oh no's. I understand that oh no feeling very well. That's exactly, even though I've been engaged with this for a couple of years, I'm still feeling the oh no's. But I also am feeling a lot of the hearts as well, that what the efficiencies we've been able to find have been incredible. This is great. This is great. I love all these reactions coming through. Good. So as you're putting those reactions in, I'm going to tell you a little bit about, I was in the oh no category for quite a while. How in the world are we going to do this? I'm kind of in the senior level of my career, not the beginning level of my career. And AI is definitely part of the techie world. I am not a tech. I like to talk about the fact that I'm married to a techie. My son is a techie. I am not the techie. And when I tell my son and my husband that I'm presenting on AI, they still are just kind of shaking their heads and wondering, how did mom get into this field? Well, that's head shake is for good reason. I'm not the techie one, but what I do know how to do is to really bring a team together and to champion it and to create the space for it. I used the term earlier as AI being the great equalizer. I really see this space as a space where we can all engage. We can all find our space here and to help move this forward to improve our lives and to improve the work that we do. So thank you for those reactions I feel all of them across the board. But this is where I turned to when I was thinking about what can SUU do to incorporate AI. And Nathan Wiggins, that I mentioned earlier, he was our data science physician that we were able to hire from the AI for RA work. And that was absolutely the best move I could do ever to move forward in this AI world. Now you're probably all thinking, yeah, but you had a grant that paid for it. We don't all have grants that pay for it. So in thinking further, what do you do? How do you incorporate somebody on your team? And I really want to celebrate the fact that we are living in a world that if we do not have a data science position on our teams, that we really are in the space where we need to be thinking very strategically about implementing that regularly on our OSP teams. It has absolutely been the saving grace for me at my institution. And wow, what the work that that position has brought has been incredible. His very first week that he was here with us, he said, "Hey, Sylvia, I've got an idea brewing in my head. What can I do here? And I want to see what you're thinking about this proposal." And he brought forward this proposal to create a RAT team, research analytics team. And yes, we really just moved on this whole acronym of the RAT and how well that fits into the research side of it. And he says, we've got some really amazing students in our data analytics degree programs here. What if I was able to bring in some math students, some analytics students, some business students, and create a team that could help find these processes and bring them together for us? And I was like, wow, we're a teaching institution. What? Of course we should be doing this. Of course, absolutely yes. And I tell you, I took it to my boss, and he was absolutely a yes. And then he proposed to fund a couple of these students. And we expect this team to continue to grow, utilizing the talents and the assets that are already within our own institution. I guarantee you that your institutions have those same assets. And I would just encourage you to reach out to those students, and don't ever underestimate what these young professionals can do for us. They are doing absolute incredible work. So for some examples of what they've done, our budget availability report. That is something that I used to get once a month on the first of each month. It was 150 pages, and I would quickly delegate that to a member of my team who hated it just as much as I did to review how much funding was left in each grant, and to quickly review the expenses to see if something looked like it was possibly not allowable or locable, and to do that analysis. And it took a lot of time. This was something that we very quickly said, this is where I want automated. This is a good AI use. It's something that takes a lot of time but can be analyzed very easily without a lot of the it depends scenarios. It then brings back a list of grants that do have a yellow, green, or red marker on it. If it's red or yellow, then we only have to look at the red or yellow grants. It has significantly saved us time to do that. Another example was reviewing our faculty and staff institutional-based salary limitations. We all know that we have those limitations from the uniform guidance, and that we are supposed to be reviewing that as our own institutions to make sure we are in line and in compliance. We have our SUU RAT team, our students, and they've only been together now for, I think it's 4 months that they've been working together. So this has been really quick progress. They now have an AI process for that. It looks at all of our different faculty and staff engaged in grants. It knows what their contract is, whether it's a 9-month, 10-month, 12-month. It analyzes what they've been paid out in grants. It knows what that 100% limitation is, and it sends us a warning if they are above that limitation. Then we look at, last time we ran this, it gave us a warning for just 3 different faculty, and we were able to only have to review those 3 faculty instead of all across the board. Effort reporting solutions. This one is a work in progress. I told Nathan on his first day that if he could solve effort report for all of us, he'd be a rich man and he could retire very, very young. And I tell you, they are making some really good progress in this as well. And of course, that ties to the IBS work that they are doing. We will have some more good work from that to show soon. Today, after this meeting, I have my first Dean's Council, where they are going to be looking at the automated dean, provost, and VP reports. These are reports that now go to our deans on an automated basis every single quarter to show all of the proposals that have been done in their college and all of the awards in their college. And it'll have a list of who those engaged faculty are that the deans can now go celebrate with their colleges. We thought that that would be a great use for the celebration to happen from their leadership coming down, not just from our office, but also come from their leadership. And so that's happening this afternoon for the first time. Well, I'm excited to see how that rolls out. Then this last bullet point was the part that was really kind of an eye-opener, and how you gain buy-in from your institution is thinking about solutions that will help you, and like Ish had mentioned, but have an impact across the institution, then even across neighboring institutions, all the way through the whole national research enterprise. Um, we were talking about workload simulations. When we're thinking about buying out course buyouts, what does that do to their workload? So the chair will then look at the workload within their environment. How many adjuncts are they going to need to bring in to cover for that faculty that we have bought out the time? Or AI can look and say, hey, maybe their course they're teaching only has an average of 15 students in it. Maybe we can put those students in two separate classes and not have to even replace that class, and coming up with some kind of simulation that can do that for us. That would be a great use if we could figure that out for our little Spark office, that then they could use institutionally and then even nationally. I'm sure there would be many more that would be interested in that kind of application. And so thinking about all of these different use cases, recognizing that we use the term AI very inclusively, but it really is AI connected with data science and connected with automation. And it's those three that, when you get them to work together, that's when the true magic really, really happens. So that was a lot. Were there any questions that came in, Ish? Were you watching to see by chance?
I was. There's two kind of themes that I think emerged in the questions we received, as well as some of the comments in the chat that I saw pop up. One of them was related to the environmental impact of AI, right? And I think when folks talk about that, they're talking about all the power that is needed to generate the computing that AI requires and all the data centers being built all over the place. I think that's just one example of potential negative consequences of artificial intelligence. A game we play in my house is let's watch a video and try to get it if it's AI or legitimate, and it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard already. And so, you know, I don't think that I personally have answers for what the appropriate answer is for society as we weigh those trade-offs. One of my biggest concerns is the regulatory state always lags behind real world activities. And so are we ever going to be in a position where we can um, appropriately regulate artificial intelligence solution as it develops? I don't know. I think that's another legitimate concern. This is a long-winded way of saying I don't think I have answers for you, but I also didn't want to ignore the question and wanted to acknowledge that, yeah, this isn't utopia. This stuff does have, some real world trade-offs and consequences that we as, humanity need to be aware of. Sylvia, anything you would wanna add to that? And then I'm gonna dive into the data security questions because that was another theme that I saw here.
Bet, as Tara mentioned, I am co-chairing the fourth AI symposium in Puerto Rico in March. And this is absolutely at the forefront of our focus right now, is bringing that conversation forward. And while I'm not in a position to make any announcements yet about how it's going to roll forward, I want you to know that it is absolutely a focus of what we are looking at that symposium. And I'm really excited about the possibilities of the information that'll be coming forward in that space, and thinking beyond not just environmental impact, but the materials, critical materials that it requires, and the energy sources that it requires. There's a lot more to this conversation that I think we really do need to be good stewards of, and to bring forward in this. So yes, it is part of the conversation. I'm not at the I cannot announce just yet what we will be doing, but please look for more information coming soon in that regard.
Wonderful. And now pivoting to the data security question. You know, closed models and open models. So I don't want to say this is 100% consensus, but one of the kind of ideas that there's somewhat of consensus around is, are you using the AI product as a tool, or is it amounting to a disclosure to a third party? So if you are using publicly available ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, right, anything like that, then they are taking your data, and that is amounting to a disclosure to a third party. So these publicly available tools, you can't interact with it with identifiable and proprietary data. And your organization needs to have policies around that concept, independent of leveraging any artificial intelligence tools, that folks understand that as they're interfacing with these publicly available tools, they're not putting identifiable, your proprietary information in their third-party proprietary information. There is de-identification that you can go through for certain documents and make it um, palatable to interact with a publicly available AI tool. But what you really want to have is a closed environment and a local tenant, right? So ChatGPT does sell enterprise-wide licenses where you have a local tenant. Whenever you're dealing with an artificial intelligence, software solution, so to speak, you want to make sure that you have a local tenant and only it's on your server, and your local tenant is learning from your data and your interaction with the system, but that's not feeding to that vendor's larger AI model. And if it is feeding to a larger AI model, then again, that's a disclosure to a third party. One thing that's become very clear to me is, as you negotiate those contracts with vendors, it's more standard now to say you're getting a localized tenant than not, because everybody has this concern. But what I've also learned is they're still collecting data on user behavior. And so, do be aware of that. And now the idea is, if you're interacting with it as a tool and not as a disclosure to a third party, then it's no different than when you're interacting with Word or Excel or Adobe and things of this nature. So when you're thinking about this, your use cases are going to be significantly more limited if all you have access to is publicly available artificial intelligence tools.
I will add that back in the mid 90s, we had the conversation going around electronic research administration tools. There was these fantastic new tools that we were all going to be using in research administration that was going to make life just wonderful. And we had to become good friends with our chief information officers. We are right back there now in 2026, 30 years later, saying, hey, we need to be very good friends with our chief information officers and helping them understand what our needs are and for them to help us understand what they have going already. We had as part of our grant, we had funding to purchase what they call a DGX Spark system. That's just a desktop server that holds all this information secure. And after we had purchased it, we had gotten approval from our um, system admins to do it. When we were talking to him later, he says, Sylvia, we also can just simply do this by buying more tokens for our cloud environment. He says it's already certified, HIPAA certified and FERPA certified. I'm sure it'll be doing well enough for what we need. I'm like, well, now you tell me after we just spent the $5,000 for this system. And he just kind of laughed. He's like, well, you're having a system, your own server absolutely is your best option. That's your foolproof option. But there are other ways as well. So I would just encourage you have those conversations early and often with your chief information officers.
Am I safe to go to the next slide, Sylvia?
You bet.
Okay, I guess this is where I have to say some things. So on my own AI journey, this is some areas where we found practical applications. I saw somebody mention, IRB, IBC, IACUC protocols in the chat, and we'll talk about that here in a second. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, just so it makes sense how I got involved in artificial intelligence because I think solving your own problems is a great way to figure out, where to start to look and try to tackle things. So when I ran my own contracts team at the University of Chicago and we were short staffed, the answer was always ish, just do two or three jobs until you hire and train somebody. And I didn't like that answer after a while. And so I originally came to consulting to be able to help institutions negotiate their research contracts. And the business model we established was a flat price per contract. What that did was put a lot of efficiency pressure on my team because if we have a flat fee and things spin out of control, then not only are we not making money, we're legitimately losing money. And so I started to look at contracting artificial intelligence solutions from a efficiency perspective. And from looking at contracting AI solutions that we'll talk about here in a sec, what are you really doing? You're taking a document and you're comparing it against a set of criteria. What are other areas where we're doing that? Pre-award, when we're putting a proposal together, we're reviewing that proposal against RFP requirements and we're reviewing that proposal against institutional requirements. In the protocol review space, again, we're reviewing it against federal requirements, we're reviewing it against institutional requirements, and things of that nature. So when you look at the bottom four here, I went from contracts into these other spaces because to me the logic behind the technology was similar, right? You're comparing one document against a set of requirements. In the budget and coverage analysis space, and just in case there's folks on here who aren't familiar with coverage analysis, what you're doing there is you're looking through a clinical trial protocol and the procedures that are going to take place, and you're deciding this is research and will be billed to the pharmaceutical company running the trial, or this is standard of care, the patient would have had this anyway, and it's going to be billed to insurance. And so what you're doing is you're reviewing this schedule of events in a protocol. You're reviewing the Medicare coverage analysis guidelines, and you're noting if it's covered or not by insurance. Budgets, you're doing the same thing. You're taking a schedule of events in a protocol and you're applying it to a sponsor's Excel budget template, or you're applying it to your own internal budget template, right? And so there is a lot of recreation of the same data set, that schedule of events in different formats. There is a third component of clinical trial startup that you do not see on here, and that's your clinical trial management system calendar builds. That is another point in the study startup process where you're taking a schedule of events and you're applying that to your clinical trial management system. And so if you invent that, you're going to be rich like the person who is doing the effort reporting invention that Sylvia mentioned, right? And so if there was a tool that could take a PDF protocol, create budget grids, create coverage analysis, and create CTMS calendars from it, you are talking about astronomical savings, and you're also talking about consistency of quality. What happens right now with these processes is they're siloed. You generally have one person doing the budget, you have one person doing the coverage analysis, you have one person doing the calendar build. That means they're all interpreting that schedule of events independently. This goes back to that error-prone point that we made about aspects of a process that make it ripe for artificial intelligence. We have institutions that have entire departments where they look at congruency among those documents, right? And so I wanted to share that background before we get into these details because we started focusing on budgets and coverage analysis because there is that repeated reinterpretation of data that we already have. I had a problem with contracts in my own life that I was trying to solve. And so look there. And then I said, wait a second. This same concept plays in these other areas where I know my industry has problems. So let's look for solutions there. Now, in the contracting space specifically, I wanted to talk about my journey there in a little bit more detail. So when I started looking at it, what did I wanted to do? I wanted to reduce the time to produce initial red lines. That I think what most of us want to do when we look at contracts. And I think when Sylvia was talking about the methodology of going through that task, right? Understanding the task, but then understanding what is the outcome that you want in relation to that task, I think is important. Then maybe we can reduce the amount of time to review counters. And two things that I wasn't thinking about at all is quality control and reduce training burden. Somebody made the comment in the chat that when they use AI, it's come up with mistakes and hallucinations and things of that nature. That is legit. And that's why Sylvia made that point about doing quality assurance on the back end. Now, what happens in my contracting world? I get two sets of eyes on every contract, depending on its complexity, right? The person who does the draft and the person who does the quality assurance review. So I'm already doing that quality assurance review. And so if I could have a human do the quality assurance review on the artificial intelligence's work, I've now created a lot of efficiency for my team. And so I look at it as a quality control mechanism. If it's impossible for my new person to miss something in the contract because the AI flags it all the time as missing, being a concept that is not present in the agreement, then it makes it impossible, right, for them to miss that during their red lines. It also reduces the training burden because the AI can give them real-time feedback. The worst interview answer I ever gave is somebody was interviewing me for assistant director of contracts position, and they asked me, what would your training program be? And I talked a lot about individual mentorship. And I think, unfortunately, that's how a lot of us train people in the research contracting space, which is not scalable, but it's also not real-time feedback, right? You have to take the time to look at what they've done and give them feedback. And what the AI can do is give your newer employees real-time feedback. Now, when you look at the system capabilities of these solutions, kind of the baseline, most rudimentary one is flagging issues. And that is, this doesn't align with your guidelines, this aligns with your guidelines, this is in your guidelines, but it's a concept not present in this agreement. Then, can it display your contractual playbook, right? What do you want this position to say? But then, even more importantly, can it tell the person looking at it how what the contract says deviates from what your guidelines say? Can it pull in precedent? And we'll talk about precedent here in a little bit more detail. But if we look at our contracting lives today, what are we doing? We get a contract with counterparty A. We look through our database to find the most recent contract we did with counterparty A. We see if it's the same template, and we see if we can leverage it. This can do that automatically and pull in multiple examples for you to choose from. Then suggesting red lines. When we talk about errors and hallucinations, if you look at contracting AI, this is where it messes up the most today is in suggesting red lines. And so you want to have a system where it doesn't automatically apply AI generated red lines, but it gives you the option to generate a red line and then apply it as is, reject it, edit it before you apply it. So you have that human quality control concept on top of it. I tested some solutions that automatically redlined, and to the person that made the comment in the chat, you're right. I found myself spending a lot of time undoing red lines that they unnecessarily applied. And then ideally, you have a closed chatbot environment in your contracting solution as well, where you can say, hey, I need to escalate this to the data security team. Can you please create me a summary in an email format of the data security terms within this agreement? Or I need to explain the intellectual property provisions of this to the head of the Department of Neurology. Or I want to ask it, hey, what is standard indemnification on a clinical trial agreement, right? And so a lot of systems have different components of this. Ideally, you find one with all of them, and they are out there. All right, data used to train the model. When it comes to contracts, there's a large variance in contractual language. That is the beauty of language, is that there's essentially infinite number of ways to say the same thing. Most of your contracting models are originally built on commercial terms, right? Because that's what they have aspects to. Now, there's a lot of concepts that bleed over from commercial terms to research contracting, but there's generally some fine tuning that is needed. Now, we talked about economies of scale in your institution. Take your research administration hat off the table. Who's doing commercial contracts? Procurement. Procurement is doing commercial contracts all the time. Your general counsel is dealing with commercial contracts. Also, one that I recently realized, libraries. Libraries are dealing with commercial contracts all the time when they sign subscriptions for data sets or research tools or things of this nature. Data quality over quantity. So when I was doing my first AI solution and they said, we need your precedent, I made the mistake of just dumping all of my precedent in there. Well, what we contracting folks know is not all precedent is created equal. And there was some bad precedent that I should not have put into my artificial intelligence tool. And so you want to make sure that the data you're feeding it to build and train the model is high quality data. I also recommend having two subject matter experts when you're doing kind of any implementation, right? The subject matter expert in this case of the research contracting process, right? Or in Sylvia's case, the effort reporting process, and then the technical expert of the artificial intelligence tool. And then this isn't a set it and forget it scenario, right? It would be great if we just set it up to do the laundry and we never had to worry about it again. But there's fine tuning of these models that is going to be needed after deployment and after you start doing those quality assurance checks. So look at this as a true implementation. Don't have somebody who has a 40 to 50 to 60 hour a week job already and just say, hey, you're going to implement and monitor this artificial intelligence solution on top of that. Your chances of success are going to be greatly reduced. And so look at these implementations just as you would look at the implementation of any type of new, system that you're implementing. Although it's not necessarily a system, you're going to have to develop business processes and controls and quality assurance checks and how you're going to fine tune the model and update it. So some points about implementation. Have an adoption plan. Don't go into this and say to yourself, well, on day one, we haven't saved time, so garbage, we're done with it. We're not going to do anything else with this solution. Just from a user experience perspective, it's going to take time for people to understand how to interact with a new solution. There's always a larger hurdle with senior versus junior staff. And this is kind of true with anything when you want senior staff to do something new, right? I know how to do it. I'm good at it. I do it fast. Leave me alone. Don't mess up my business process. Well, that's maybe not the appropriate view we want to have. We want to look to the future and develop capabilities that will allow us to scale without necessarily needing to add to headcount. We're all under funding pressure, right? Also, for me, I can do a CDA very quickly. There's not a lot of meat on the bone there for AI to save me from a time perspective, right? And so there's also those types of considerations in junior versus senior staff. Models improve through the use of time. So if it's not the best on day one, work with it, continue to improve upon it, and it will get there. And data security, right? Not going to go into this because we already talked about this on the call. You want to make sure whatever tool you're using, it's not taking your data and training their larger model. All right, so look at some of the other areas that we've done some work in. So the budget is, like I said, one of several steps in the clinical trial process requiring conversion from the protocol schedule of events to another document. Not only that, you're looking at two different templates. You have to negotiate off of the sponsor's template, and then you have your own internal template that is presenting the financials of the study right internally. And so your budget negotiators generally are taking the schedule events, applying it to two different Excel grids, and then as they go through negotiations, they have to continually update those Excel grids to make sure that they align. And people, when they talk about clinical trials, they always say, oh, the contract takes too long. Well, the contract beats the budget to the finish line like 90% of the time, if not more, but you can't sign the contract until the budget is also done. And so, the point here is this is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest delays in activating clinical trials in the United States of America. And so let's look at something in this area where we can improve this. And we have found tools out there that will allow us to do this. And what it does is it takes the schedule events, it takes your institutional charge master, and it creates these grids for you with that pricing based on those procedures already included. And then you do your quality assurance on top. Same thing with Medicare coverage analysis. Why not have the artificial intelligence solution based on the CPT codes that you've assigned to the procedures in the process, do automatic matching with Medicare's coverage guidelines? Huge room for improvement there, right? When we use vendors for coverage analysis, what's their turnaround times? 10 business days, a month, right? They're not, tomorrow. And so to what extent can we automate that, bring those turnaround times to reduce the study startup pipeline or the study startup time, I should say. That's something that all of us sites are being graded on by the pharmaceutical industry. Then let's get into scopes of work. All right. So we have a rubric that as a central office we're grading a proposal by. Why not have the artificial intelligence review against that rubric? Whether it's, are there international components of this? Are there data transfers? Is it human subjects research? Are animals involved? Then all the RFP requirements. We can build a model that says, okay, when we do an NSF proposal, when we do an NIH proposal, we have this standard model build that is going to review it against NIH and NSF and our internal requirements. Our study team can run their proposal through that prior to submission to the central office, thus creating a higher quality submission to the central office. And the central office can review against that same rubric. Same thing with the protocol world, IRB, IACUC, IBC. What are study teams doing? They're filling out answers to your stock questions in your electronic systems, right? Why don't we automate that review so that the study team prior to submission can get feedback on how closely their answers align with what you're looking for? And then when you get the submission, you have that tool to expedite your review as well. And so those are the areas where we've done our work and found solutions for found solutions. And so with that, we have 2 minutes left. That was our last slide. So Sylvia, is there anything you wanted to speak to in the questions, or are we okay to wrap up?
Now, just really quickly, there's a lot of questions about what do you do with the bad information or protecting your information, and what do you do when there's hallucinations? When in our work with the AI4RA, that is a system being created for research administration, but we do a lot of what we call poisoning. We will poison the PDFs to make sure that the system recognizes that bad term that can be accepted, and then we correct it. So that is work that is being done. And so I just threw in the chat really quick another a link to joining that community of practice because that work is being done by research administrators for research administration. So thanks so much for the
Awesome.
opportunity. And we better throw it back to Tara to wrap us up.
Well, thank you so much, Ishva and Sylvia. We are in this remarkable moment of possibility. one guided by responsibility and ethical stewardship. And we are so grateful for the way you are helping us navigate through this very evolving conversation. And we'll hope you'll join us, everyone, for the final two programs in our Navigating Change series, which has supported over 25,000 participants this year. We'll be back together one more time this week on Thursday, December 4th at 2 p.m. for another special edition, Building Research Resilience, Strategies for Sustainable Impact. Dottie Waters at Virginia State and Matthew Kingor at Cayuse will be presenting that program. And then the finale, the grand finale, Tuesday, December 16th, for your mind and your heart. Hot Issues and Grants 2025 Recap and 2026 Outlook with Gil Tran, Attain Partners. Registration is on our website, www.ncura.edu, under the Changing Federal Landscape tab. So thank you once again for joining us. And as we, as a community, continue navigating change together, we'll carry forward the ideas and inspiration we shared today, embracing the possibilities ahead, and shaping the future of the profession with intention, responsibility, and great optimism. We look forward to seeing you at our upcoming sessions. Until then, please stay well. Thank you again. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.